Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to PPPD. This week we're going to be talking about audiobooks. Terry, being the busy woman that she is, couldn't be here to record with me this week, so I nabbed Dr. Rose Brock, who we are lucky enough to get to work with every day.
Thank you.
Yes.
I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Is this where I get to do jazz hands?
Jazz hands.
Jazz hands, okay.
All right, so as I said, we're going to talk about audiobooks, and Dr. Brock is kind of an expert in audiobooks. Her dissertation was on a topic.
It was. I actually did a study where I looked at attitudes about audiobooks with librarians, school librarians all over the state of Texas, and it was very exciting to me.
Well, and you know, audiobooks have been so much. I think with the advances in technology, it is so much easier, and I think more acceptable for librarians to include them in their libraries now because the way they can be packaged. You know, they've got the playaways or the whatever.
Absolutely, yeah. There's the technology continues to emerge, and I mean it's just changing faster and faster.
Overdrive, where they don't
absolutely.
even have to check them out. They're just digital downloads.
Right.
That totally makes it easy. Because really, it was tough checking out audiobooks when it was back on cassettes.
It was.
And then CDs, because you come back and what happens to one of the CDs?
Well, if it goes missing, and I will say, I can speak to being a school librarian.
Yes.
I had a pretty substantial CD collection, about 700 audiobooks when I left in the school where I worked, and I had I'd moved on to digital too, but I had both. And part of the reason, and to make a case for why, I mean, I think we're getting there. I think we're absolutely going to go to a place where everything will be a digital, downloadable, streamable kind of platform. But at least up until the point where I was still working in a school library, the reason that I chose to maintain both was one, not every kid had a device to play. And again, that's changing. My school ended up, before I left there, it went to a one-to-one platform where students had devices checked out to them. So they had iPads. And so then all those audiobooks I had bought, the digital audiobook collection that we had, they could use those. But the reason, there were a couple reasons why I chose to still have both, to maintain both. One was there were just titles that weren't available in digital format. And at least at that point, the Harry Potters still weren't. So you actually physically, if you wanted to listen, and oh my gosh, if you've not ever listened to Jim Dale, I know you have, but for those of you watching, if you've never listened to Harry Potter on audio, it's a pretty amazing thing.
And there are kind of two camps, because there are people that like Jim Dale, and there are some that like Stephen Fry.
Very true.
I'm a Jim Dale fan.
I'm a Jim Dale fan too. I really am. But I had listened to the Jim Dale productions before I listened. So I guess my heart, it's like an Edward and Jacob kind of thing from going back. Like Edward had my heart so early on. I was all into the vampire. I never could get into Camp Werewolf.
I was not a Jacob fan.
But I think that was why. And so, Jim Dale. So for the people that haven't experienced that, it's amazing. So for kids and my patrons, it was really important to me to have those. And then also in a school, whether you're a classroom teacher or the school librarian, there are a lot of restrictions sometimes about streaming services. Either you couldn't have them. In my case, the district where I worked, we couldn't have an Overdrive account because it was a subscription service, and the money, our book money, came from oh gosh, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank for a second. I'm trying to think of the pot of money that we got. I guess it was a bond. Thank you.
Okay.
To myself, thank you. It popped back in my brain. And because of that, the things we purchased had to have a shelf life. Yeah. So we couldn't spend it on that. So we had to be creative. I was able to find some good workarounds. But I know there are some things in the research that I did on audiobooks, and looking at it was interesting, and I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about my research, but overwhelmingly, the librarians in Texas school librarians felt like audiobooks were a really great thing, which I was thrilled to see. But not all of them had necessarily robust collections. And a big hiccup in that was either platforms or funding, because audiobooks can be expensive. And when I've had the good fortune to be able to step into audiobook studios a few times, and when you see those being recorded and you see the hours that go into, I mean, you think about when you're listening, depending on the length of the book, the longer the production. it's expensive to make those, so that cost has to go somewhere. So it's going to go to the consumer.
So are you still listening to Crooked Kingdom?
I am.
So am I.
Yeah.
That's 18 hours.
It is. I'm 12 hours in,
Yeah.
and so this is Leigh Bardugo's new. It's the follow-up book.
It's a sequel to Six of Crows.
Oh my gosh, it's so flippin' good. It's wow.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because for me, like in audio production, I often will like a single narrator. Like I want that person, and I
Yeah.
But when there are different kinds of audio productions: single narrator, multicast, and in this case, in Crooked Kingdom, they've got different narrators narrating the story based on the characters, and I really like it.
I do too.
And I think when it's done well, it's done. Then it really can be really powerful.
But you're right. I'm not just dying for another narrator come on because I like their voice so much. I like all of those narrators in this collection.
Right.
And
it doesn't always work. Sometimes it works really
right.
well.
Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the narrator is not so good with a character, and it totally pulls you out of the story.
Right, and that's a whole different issue sometimes, that an audiobook can absolutely make a book for a reader or a listener. I always use, and I'm certainly not alone in using this verbiage, but I always say, like with working with kids, I would always say, I really wanted to level the playing field. So when a student would come in and say, I'm looking for this book, and I'd say, do you want to read it with your eyes or your ears? Because I knew from research that had been done long before mine and my own research along the way that audiobooks had a lot of value. And so, and I kind of discovered that as a classroom teacher, but long before I moved into the library, because I was always trying to I just had kids. We did, in my classroom, we did SSR every day. Yep. And I had kids that, even though I had a really wide variety of books in my classroom and magazines, and I pretty much would let them read. I mean, unless it was Hustler, I'd let them read it, Now, Playboy's different. That has stories. Kidding. But I mean, all joking aside, like if they wanted to read a car manual, I just didn't mind. But I had kids who just didn't want to interact with print. And so it was one of those weird kind of aha moments, or a duh moment, depending on how you want to look at it, where thinking about that and just having some frustration, really trying to, make the match with the reader. I remembered a story about my brother, who was also not a reader, and but he was a long-haul truck driver, and he would listen to audiobooks, and he would come home, like, this was a guy that never talked about books, never talked about stories, and then he got into listening to these Jonathan Kellerman books, and he would come home and he would tell me about them. And so he started, I mean, again, we're talking the cassettes, we're going back like 15 plus years, almost 20 years. And but he was engaged in the story and excited about the story, so I started listening, and then like we could come together and have a conversation, and then my aha moment was like, oh wait. And so I got, like, I had department money. I probably had like $70 or something, basically nothing, but I got like 2 or 3 in cassette players, like you're talking about. And that was just like an option in the room. And so I just kind of stumbled upon it, really because of my brother's experience. So like, oh, this could really work. And so kids, even my most reluctant of readers, and I think it's really important that we don't pigeonhole audiobooks to reluctant readers. A lot of times we do that. People think, well, because they work so well with people acquiring language and reluctant readers, but they also can just be really wonderful resources for really gifted readers. I mean, I consider myself a pretty darn good reader. I know you're a pretty darn good reader.
I would say I'm not a reluctant reader.
So is Terry. But I mean,
love 'em.
Right. It's a different way to experience a story, but at the end of the day, I think, again, that leveling the playing field and coming full circle, if we're looking at it from a more global lens, we really get an opportunity. At the end of the day, we're engaging in story. We get to come to the table and be part of the conversation. It doesn't matter what the delivery method is. And I think for educators, for teachers and librarians, that's really important. And there's a lot of research that's already been done. And I don't think that, we're going to point you, I think we're going to talk about some resources. But, there's a lot of stuff. If you need the evidence to make a case, there's a lot of work that people have done, experts in the field. I certainly have tried to contribute what I can to, and really just pulling the research that's already been shared and so forth. But I think at the end of the day, it's really about sharing stories and allowing students to engage in conversation, engage in discussion, all of that. And I think that's really important.
Right. And we're going to have all of the resources linked in the description underneath the video, so you can definitely click on those links. And so, yeah. So I have a couple examples of some great audios. If you haven't, ever listened to any, here's the thing, because what Rose just said is so true. It can make a mediocre book excellent, or it can make an excellent book.
That's true.
It's true. The narrator is so important in the story. So here's a few to start with. And I've got 1 middle grade and 3 YAs, I guess, for my examples. And then in the resources link, I think I think Rose is going to talk about talk about some awards, which is also a perfect place to start too when you're looking for recommendations for starting. But I would suggest listening to Beauty Queens by Libba Bray. Now
such a hoot.
She's the narrator. The author is the narrator, and that doesn't always work.
Oh no, it really often doesn't work.
Doesn't.
I think that's really, really important to
to
make clear.
Just because they know their work well doesn't mean they can perform it.
Absolutely.
These are actors in a
Right.
way. They have to be able to perform. But Libba Bray does a fantastic job narrating her own work.
She does, and it's a favorite of mine too. So I'm glad that because it's a little bit of an older title, and it's definitely a title for. I mean, it's a YA title,
YA.
so you're not going to give that to your 5th grader, but it is a hoot. The book itself is kind of outrageous and just amazing.
It's humorous. It's
absolutely,
funny.
it's satire.
Totally.
But Libba, I read it actually first with my eyes, and then I got to go back and hear part of the audio, and I remember thinking, and I love the book. I was in stitches, but I remember thinking just the delivery of it, she just hit. So good recommendation.
I would also suggest SCOWLER.
Oh my gosh.
By Daniel Kraus. Now this is definitely YA, and it is totally creepy.
Terrifying.
It is terrifying. Rotters is also by Daniel Kraus, and it's also a superb audio.
Is this a good time for me to ask you who narrates those? Because there's a reason I want to ask.
He's
Karen that.
He's my number 1 on my favorite narrators.
Oh, I know
list.
he is. So go ahead and tell everybody about your love fest.
I love KIRBY HEYBORNE. He is the narrator for both SCOWLER and Rotters, among many, many, many other things as well. Yeah. But for those 2 especially, he is the narrator. And SCOWLER won an Odyssey Award.
It did.
It won an Odyssey Award, which is the, ALA YALSA award for best audio for YA, not YA, production.
Across the board.
Of the year, and so it won. So
yeah.
That's great.
And KIRBY is amazing. I want to second that. He's just really, he's very dynamic, but he's got a lot of range in what he does. Yeah. I would agree. If I had to name an audio crush, I think he's definitely one of them. And then for ladies, are you a fan of Catherine Kellgren's work? Do you know her stuff?
You'd have to tell me what she did.
I'm trying to think. She's done so many different things.
I'm going to need to jot her down so I can go find her.
She's I absolutely love her in a Mary Rose Wood series, the Incorrigible Children.
Oh, okay.
Those. She is a hoot, and she's also she did some of the Rick Riordan. She did the Kane Chronicles. She does. I'm trying to think. It's is it Bloody Jack? The girl who and I.
Oh yes, by L.A.
Yes.
Meyer or whatever.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And
Bloody
I can't remember.
Jack?
Yeah. It's a girl who
hides in to be a boy and to pirates.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And she's fantastic at those. She's really, really great.
I'll have to go back and find her.
She's great. I also really love speaking of Libba Bray, I loved both of the audios for Diviners. Diviners and then Layer of Dreams. There's 2
that
books
was multiple
so far.
casts too,
No,
right?
it's not. It's January. What is her name? I even wrote it down. January Lavoie. She's fantastic, and I think it won not the Odyssey, but the Oddies.
Oddies,
Okay,
okay.
so the Audiobook Publishers Association has an award called the Oddies, and I believe in the YA category it was at least a finalist. I don't know if it actually won or not, but I know it was a finalist in that category, and those are really, really fantastic. And I want to go back to the you making mention of authors performing their own work. because I think you were right. I think it's a very common thing authors think that they are going to read their book because they're like, I know this works so well. But I think that performance piece, and again, that really speaks to another benefit of audio, is that, in my mind, like I like you, we commute a long way to come to work. And so I listen mostly in my car. I do, but I catch myself when I get really hooked on a book, I'll start putting my earbuds in and walking around the house doing other stuff. I know my husband, like when he does yard work, he does it. And kids in general, I think, our lives we're always on the go. And again, because our devices are so much more friendly, it's not lugging around that cassette player or even, in most cases, CD players. We just, it's just easier to access it. And definitely for me, I go back and forth between reading with my eyes and my ears. But I love the ability to do that. And so anyway,
when I'm hooked on a book, I'll end up stopping the audio and sitting in my car for a while until I get to a good stopping point, and then I'll go find my print book or my ebook, and I'll find where I was.
Oh, I do that too.
And do that. That's what I do, because I'll read at night, in bed, and so I can finish the book.
I think Harry Potter 5 was the first time I did that, and I was doing my doctoral work, and I was driving to Denton, and the book had just come out. I had the audio as well, and I'd go to class, I'd sit in class, so I'd listen, and then I'd listen on the way home, and as soon as I got back, I'd figure out exactly where I was, and then I'd read, and then I'd fast forward the next day when I had to drive back to campus. It was summer. I remember that vividly, and that was the first time I did that. I bought the audio of Crooked Kingdom, but I'm about to buy the print because same thing. I've wanted to listen all the time, and there are just times I was doing some work for our, teaching, and I was listening, and I realized I was doing a terrible job of like trying to grade as I was listening. I was like, okay, there's only some degree, some multitasking can work.
Totally can wash dishes while you listen to it.
I was going to say, I think it depends on like the creative side. It was interesting last year this past spring at the North Texas Teen Book Festival, one of our authors, I think he was on the panel with you, Nathan Hale, who's a graphic novelist. He does the Hazardous Tales. He was talking, again, he's an artist and a writer, and he was talking about, as a kid, how audiobooks made all the difference for him. And I was like, nice plug for audio. And he talked about drawing. Like in his case, he draws and listens to audio. So I had never thought about that. So I think it really depends on what it is you're doing, like what side of the brain you're trying to use. But I realized I didn't finish my comment about authors and narrators. Other people that I think are really worth listening to, Judy Blume did for younger listeners. She did all of the Peter Hatcher stuff. So like, Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing and all those, and they're really delightful. Jack Gantos, if you can ever listen to anything Jack has done, he's
a great speaker.
He is. So he's a great performer of his books. But again, it's kind of a rarity. There's a reason that
Neil Gaiman
is a great for Graveyard Book. He's wonderful.
Yes, he is. He definitely narrates superbly.
Right. Well, and he's got the accent.
He's got the accent
too. Right there, he's got me every time.
Which then leads me to my other two favorite audiobooks that you should listen to would be Skullduggery Pleasant.
Oh my gosh, love it.
Yeah. Now, Rupert Degas is the one that narrates like book 1 through 4. So Rupert Degas is one of my fave. He's on my favorite list of narrators. Well, then they switched narrators like book 5, and I was like, man, it took me a long time to get back into that. Yeah, because I really love Rupert Degas. He's Skullduggery to me.
Right.
Just like Jim Dale.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But he's got that accent too. It's kind of like the Irish accent or something. Right. So good. And then we've got Etiquette and Espionage. That's a great, the Gail Carriger series. It's a female of narrator, of course, because our main character is a female, but it's British. And it's just lovely to listen to, and she does a fantastic job narrating. So definitely check those books out.
Awesome. Well, we started to talk about resources. I know you're going to list them, but things if I can make a plug for some stuff. So for those of you that are teachers and librarians, I think often when I do presentations about audio, I can direct people to the stuff that I've written out there, and other people have written. People you need to know in the audiobook world. You need to know Mary Burkey. She's kind of the grand dame, I think, of audio. She's an educator with 30 plus years in education, and she's done a tremendous amount of work in promoting audio. She has a great book, and the book is called Audiobooks for Youth: A Practical Guide to Sound Literature. That's wonderful.
And it'll be in the description.
That's wonderful. And then another, Sharon Grover and Liz Hannegan have a book called Listening to Learn, Audiobooks Support Literacy. And the two of those ladies have done some really terrific work as well. So I direct you to that. The other thing I would direct you to that I think, again, as a classroom educator or a school librarian, the Audiobook Publishers Association just a couple years ago put together a project called the Sound Learning Project. I had the good fortune to be asked to help put those materials together. And if you go to, it's soundlearningapa.org, I think. But again, we're going to have this link. If you do a search and just do sound learning, you'll get to a PBS site. So you'll want to make sure it's the audio publishers. And I'm sure PBS is lovely and great, but you'll want to get to the audio publisher site. What I love about what they've done there, it's a dedicated site that has basically culled and pulled together all the resources for audio. So there's a great infographic about all the ways. So if you're looking for, like, I've got that principal and I need to get some money to develop an audiobook collection, or I just want to I need to make a case. Maybe we're not even there yet. Maybe I need to make a case to my teachers or on why it's okay to let kids listen during silent state of reading, or just listen to a book on their own time to count for minutes rather than it being print. It's a great place to do it because it really offers the support. In addition to that, there are videos starring me, ignore me, but far better, there are kids that there are some great testimonies. These were students at the school where I used to work, and these were kids that were audio listeners. They listened, I mean, they learned with their ears best. And so they really spoke to, and again, this was completely unsolicited. These were kids that just regularly checked out audio because, again, we built a culture where that was like, again, do you want to read it with your eyes, your ears? And they talk about why listening makes a difference to them, why it's their preferred way of experiencing a story. And so, again, if you're trying to make a case to your teachers, maybe if they're not, you know, they haven't found the religion yet, we want to bring them to church, so to speak. That APA Sound Learning site is great. In addition to those videos, there are lessons already there. Like, so again, you're somewhere in between. You've got a teacher who's like, you know what, I'll try this. And for me, that's really, in the two schools where I worked, that's how I did it. I found a teacher, actually, and just kind of serving my language arts teacher. I found a teacher who already listened to audio. And so I started working with her. We started doing, and this was, again, you know, I spent 9 years on that campus. That was year one. I started working with her. And then she started talking about those experiences and allowing kids to use them. And other teachers started listening up and were more open to it. So lessons are there. There are actual videos of both that teacher and another teacher modeling lessons with audio. So you can go and watch and see what they did. And there are worksheets there. So basically, you know, it's been built for teachers and librarians that want to start incorporating audio into their instruction, because we know teachers are really, really busy. And, you know, we always have, I know as a teacher myself, I always have the best of intentions, but man, there's a lot to do. And so as a librarian or a classroom teacher, that those pieces have been put in place there to hopefully just make life a little easier for them. And you know, the materials are there. You can take them, you can manipulate them, you can change them, but it's a starting point, which I think is good. And there's some really good stuff there. So I would definitely say that's a great place to go. The other place that I think is great, because it's kind of my baby, is the Guys Listen Project. I think a lot of teachers know John Shaska, who really founded Guys Read and the Guys Read movement. And I work with John on Guys Listen. And basically what Guys Listen is really just advocating for kids, and we use guys in the title, but really it works for all kids. Both genders, I think, equally benefit from listening. So at guyslisten.com, there are resources there, again, articles that I've written where I've called and gathered research and speak to different issues about audio and how audio benefits kids. And then there are suggestions. So if you're looking, Karin has offered a lot of titles. I curate that. There are titles there for really young guys, again, because we're playing off the guys, but titles that work for for young girls too. Kind of middle grade guys and then older guys. You can listen at the site. There are clips that you can listen to, and I would encourage, if you're so inclined, I'd encourage you to let students go there, listen, and find it's a great way. It's like going to a video and previewing, looking at a book trailer, listening to, a snippet. A sample is a great way to get a kid engaged, especially folks that maybe haven't tried it before. And there are also, John and I talk about the benefits of audio and why we feel like it's a really important mission to really try to get educators and parents to embrace audio in their kids' learning.
Right, because that's really what we need to focus on, is making sure that the teachers that we work with know that listening to an audio is still reading.
Absolutely.
And that's why we say reading with your ears, because it is reading. It requires a literacy. It requires a skill.
Absolutely.
And so, it just engages a different learning style.
Absolutely. So. And there are differences between traditional reading with your eyes and ears, but they're insignificant. And again, I could go on, and I'm not going to, I promise. but because a lot of those resources are out there if you want to know, and you can always contact me.
We'll put the email in the description,
and I'm happy to prattle on more to you personally about all the reasons that audio is amazing.
The last resource I think we're going to share, unless do you have another resource?
I don't at the moment, but I'll probably come up with one.
Is Audio Sync.
Oh, fantastic!
So during the summer, so from May to August, there's like 13 weeks that Audio Sync gives away, and you heard that right, gives away 2 audiobooks a week.
Yes, it's amazing.
Every Thursday they release 2 new ones. But once that week's over, those are gone. You can't download them anymore. So you have to get them during that week. But you can download all 13 weeks if you want. They pair a YA with usually like a classic or some other kind of nonfiction.
Right.
And they are they're fantastic titles.
Absolutely. And if I can piggyback off that, one of the things that I did, again, if we're talking to teachers and librarians, at the end of the year in May, I would do big displays about the Sync program and make sure I'd have kids into the library, and I would talk to them about this program and take them to it so they could see it, so that they were just aware of it. Because again, in the summer, kids have more downtime. They might be traveling. I'd push it out in a newsletter to parents, just to make them aware that those free resources were there, and these audio publishers are actually sharing. I mean, they're making not a penny on this. They're just doing it for the good of kids.
And I just paid $20 for my download of Crooked Kingdom. So this is a huge value.
It is.
I mean, it's amazing.
Worth every penny, though.
It is worth every penny. It is worth every penny. But as much as we listen to books, that's why I utilize my public library.
Absolutely.
So anyway.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I just thought of so many other things, but I guess we can talk audio another time, because I was thinking
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking about all the ways that audiobooks really lend themselves to authentic stories, and just really it's a great way to experience diverse titles. And
definitely, because you get the benefit of hearing the correct pronunciations. You assume.
Right.
I mean, we assume.
No, and I think again, if it's a
that's
good
the
audio,
way I learned how to say Hermione.
Me too. Absolutely. That's so funny. Same. I realized the first time, I was like, oh my gosh, I've been saying it wrong, because I had read the other books with my eyes, not my ears, and I realized I'd been saying it in my head. I'd been pronouncing it wrong the entire time. Another plug on an older audio title, an Ann Na book, A Step from Heaven. It's about a young girl whose family immigrates from Korea, and it's a beautiful, beautiful book. But I listened to the audio, and I realized, the narrator was very carefully selected. And I think that story was so much richer by hearing, because there are a lot of Korean words that are embedded, especially when she's young, talking to her parents and grandparents, and just all the cultural things. I felt like it really captured in a way that if I had I was perfectly capable of decoding the words, but the story was so much richer with getting to hear it. I felt like it was performed for me. So I think that's really, really important, that we, and I know I've cycled us back to an earlier topic, but I think that's critical too. So maybe we'll talk about that another time.
Sure.
If Terry and Karen will have me back.
Of course we will. All right. Well, thank you for watching. Be sure to email us and share your favorite audios with us.
Yeah,
so
for
we know
sure.
what
We'd
you've
love
been
it.
listening to, or comment in the YouTube video or wherever you see this video, Facebook, Twitter, wherever. Okay. So we will see you next week.